Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the delay in starting there. We are here in Singapore for round two of the former Alpha Championship for the 2024 season, back in the Tartus to round out the year. And here we are, 1 minute 30 seconds to go until we round out qualifying as well. It is Colin Knief on top at the moment with a 2 minute point 7. He is absolutely flying along. Is Colin very much class the field at the moment in this session? Then just behind him we have Matt Daly. Matt Daly at 203.0, Will Inglis 203.5, joined by Alex. Actually, no, sorry, that Alex Smith at 208.5 on the mediums. Then we have Steve Knight at the back there as well. See a bit of unsteer creeping in on Colin Knief's car. But as I say, class of the field at the moment has had 10 laps in this session so far. It's a fairly long lap here at Singapore, especially in these 1.4 multi-air powered Tartus FAO1s. About a 2 minute lap in qualifying trim. You're looking at about 2 minute 5 probably in race trim. Matt Daly, I should point out, impressive to see him up the order so quickly. He has actually had a few technical issues in this session, so has only just been able to get on. Has actually been running around on what he said was effectively wet pace, I believe, so hasn't quite been able to match his rivals and has been able to post one quick lap in this session so far. This session is coming to an end, though, so let's see. Will Inglis will get another fast lap under his belt as he crosses the line now to start another lap here, so we might stay on board for him, but we're also going to keep one keen eye on Colin Knief, who's currently leading this session. Hasn't improved through Sector 1, whereas his rival, Matt Daly, has improved to 38.4 through that first sector for Matt Daly, the car in yellow there. 3 seconds down at the moment. He matches Colin Knief's time in Sector 1. Obviously, we see that he's not quite got there in Sector 2 and 3 just yet, but will that change on this lap towards the end of the lap now? Let's find out as he heads through the final corner and on to the start-finish straight for Matt Daly. Bit of unsteer creeping in for a few of the cars, it seems. 202.6 sees Matt Daly securing second, just that little bit more, potentially not quite getting pole, though. I don't even think it's a provisional pole, to be honest. You'd have to say it's looking fairly secure out front there for Colin Knief. Paul Millman crosses the line to go P6 in the end. Up next, then, we have Alex Smith at 208.5, as I say, although that appears to be a bit of a timing error. It's a 204.3, according to the system on the back end. So we'll go with that time for now. As he gets oh so close to a wall, does Alex Smith in the now white and red liveried car. Bit of a change up for Alex there as we head down onto the start-finish straight in just a moment. Bit of weaving to go as Alex Smith doesn't quite improve just yet, but he does cross the line and he finishes with a 2 minute 9 on that last lap, so isn't going to improve for the time being. Hopefully he gets a bit more fortune in race one. Up next, then we have Will Inglis. Will Inglis, then, our final driver to be heading through towards the end of the lap. This part of the lap, of course, changing in recent years. Stadium section currently under construction, or rather the stadium around it currently under construction. So we've had a few changes to the track layout. In the world of Formula One, 4 DRS zones to contend with. We don't have to contend with those anymore. It's just out and out racing now for the drivers in the 1.4 powered engine. Oh, sorry, the 1.4 powered cars as we head on to the start finish straight. Once again, we wait for Will Inglis, our last man, to cross the line in qualifying. He does improve with a good sector 3 there, 33.9, matching the likes of Colin Knief and Matt Daly. For Matt Daly, it is very unfortunate there. Sector 1 and Sector 3 were looking pretty strong, with that middle sector, unfortunately, has cost him a real shout at pole position. I think those technical issues also costing him there as well. But at the time hit 0 on qualifying, we are going to get ready for race 1 here in Singapore, coming up in just a moment. Welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. We are here on the grid, ready for race one. And it's going to be an exciting one, I think, because Singapore never disappoints. That is certainly true. Turn one is a bit of a pinch point here, and then you feed that through to turn three, and where you got that tight left-hander where you've got to dart down towards a turn five before you open into what would usually be a DRS zone. Less than 30 seconds to go now until lights out. Colin Keefe, Matt Daly on the front row, Paul Millman, Will Inglis on the second. Then we have Alex Smith, Steve Knight on the third row, and then we have Jack Hodson rounding out the field. We're seeing some difference in strategy already, so I think it's going to make for an interesting race. We've got Colin Keefe on the medium compound tyres. We have 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away for race one here in Singapore. The bright lights illuminate this circuit in the middle of the humid night. Down to turn one, as we see Matt Daly having a look up the inside potentially. No, he didn't get the launch that he would have wanted, even with that soft compound advantage. Colin Keefe then controlling this race with those slightly more durable tyres for the time being. Will Inglis is up into third position ahead of Paul Millman here. Paul Millman defending from Alex Smith. Alex Smith, a driver on that medium compound tyre, as is Paul Millman. We usually see Paul go for the alternate strategy, so let's see if it works out for him this time around. We should have some application audio for you in just a moment. Just having a few difficulties getting that working, but as soon as it is, it'll be all good to go to hear these 1.4 multi-airs thundering through the streets of Singapore as we have Colin Keefe leading this race once again from Matt Daly. Will Inglis defending from Paul Millman, as Paul is making some good headway at the moment. As we see Alex Smith dropping back. Was that Steve Knight having an issue? It was Steve Knight. A bit of oversteer kicking in this short wheelbase car, and we see Steve plummeting down the order to 7th position. Let's hope, for his sake at least, he gets back underway and is able to get up to a decent pace and continue on being part of this race. But it's Colin Keefe still leading the race for the time being. 1.3 seconds he holds the advantage by 4 now. As he said, he's got to try and feed those medium compound tyres in nicely, and he might have a bit more temperature in the rears, though. He didn't want it. I suspect the back end kicking out as he jumps onto the throttle. The car not quite responding in the way he would have wanted. The car saying, I can't quite do that yet. Sorry, Colin. Got a lot of fuel on board. The tyres are cold. The tyres are still fresh on their medium compound, so he's not going to have the most grip at the start of this race, is Colin Keefe. This is when Matt Daly really needs to capitalise and try and gain some time, and maybe even think about overtaking Colin Keefe to try and fight for victory in this one. sounds better, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? We are back with some glorious 4-cylinder 1.4 multi-air powered engine noises. Apologies for the delay there. Colin Keith still leading this race at the time of our reconnection, if you will. Then we have Matt Daly running in P2, Will Inglis, Paul Millman, Jack Hodson, Alex Smith and Steve Knight. Alex Smith, the race potentially not quite going his way as it seems to be. I thought on those medium compound tyres especially he might be able to make some headway. It just doesn't look to have turned out that way for him, unfortunately. Meanwhile, Colin out in front, as we go on board with him, is busy setting purple sectors, would you believe it? Of course, he leads the championship by 24 points. So Monza, the rather filled round at Monza, shall we say, where there was plenty going on camera with cars perhaps being a bit closer than what we'd usually expect. As Colin Keith set a purple sector 1 and loses out sometime later on in the sector, so we could be seeing a difference in setup there. If I had to give a slight estimation, I'd say Colin might be on the lower end of downforce, just purely based off the behaviour we've seen from the car before. I could be completely wrong though, and the car could be up to temperature nicely and could be very high grip indeed. We're just not too sure really. As I say, I want to get driver interviews set up to try and get a bit more information out of these drivers, just to kind of peck their brains and really bother them before they get head into the race weekend. I think that'd be brilliant. So I'll see if we can get that sorted. Then we can find out useful things like how fast the car's going, and perhaps slightly less useful things like what they've had for dinner. Either way, let's go on board with Paul Millman. He's under pressure from Jack Hodson at the moment. Jack, we saw, didn't have the best qualifying, so not the qualifying he would have wanted, but he seems to be making up for it now in race 1. Last lap on 2 minute 4.8, Paul Millman 2 minute 5.2, so 3/10 separating these two cars at the moment. Paul very much on the, I was about to say, Paul on the offence, Paul on the defence here, while Jack is trying to find a way past now. Singapore isn't known for its ultra-long straights, but it's certainly out of street circuit. It's quite a fast street circuit, but it isn't known as a top-speed circuit where you're going to be, hunting for slipstream, that sort of thing. Perhaps maybe a little bit more with the more recent circuit changes. But in these Tartus 1.4 multi-air powered cars, you're going to be looking for a bit more slipstream than you otherwise would. Perhaps they do benefit as much as possible from as little drag as possible. So I imagine Paul is going to want to try and I'm going to say the name correctly this time. I imagine Jack is going to try and sit in the slipstream for as long as possible before making a late move. These 90-degree bends do open up perfect opportunities for a bit of a Daniel Ricciardo-esque dive bomb. Of course, that reference might be coming out of date soon, but as we see, it's not going to be a dive bomb. It's going to be proper racing as we head into the right-hander there, and it is Jack Hodson up into P4 there with a very nice move indeed. That's Paul Millman on the mediums, demoted to 5th, Jack up into 4th now. It's going to be a very interesting situation for Jack Hodson at this point, because yes, he's got ahead, but he is on that softer compound of tyre, and he's just taken 1.2 seconds out of Paul Millman, so he's certainly going to be using those tyres well at this point. So he's going to have to hope he's got plenty of life left in those tyres as we head towards the later stages of the race. We're getting close to the halfway stage, not quite there just yet, so don't worry, we've got plenty of laps to go. But we may start to see, as we get to kind of the 60%, 70% race distance completed mark, we might see those medium compounder tyres come into their own. I mean, the Formula 1 race that we saw previous weekend was full of tyre strategy and tyre stints being pushed to their absolute maximum. The medium compounder tyre in Formula 1 seemed to end up being a fairly decent tyre. Some drivers have been able to get a lot out of it, so let's see if the medium compound tyre on the likes of Paul Millman and Alex Smith will reap the same rewards as well. Jack Hodson seems to have control of this battle for the time being. There is another battle going on out in front, although it's certainly not for position just yet. It might be a bit of a strategy battle coming into play here, as we've just alluded to with Jack and Paul. We've also got Matt Daly and Colin Keith having a bit of a fight as well. They're currently separated by around about 3 seconds. Matt Daly hunting down Colin at this moment in time, although the previous lap was pretty much identical. Matt potentially using up the last of his soft compound advantage, while he knows that Colin Keith is eventually going to be a little bit more comfortable on his mediums later on. It's going to be fascinating, I think, for race 2 as well. We've got that reverse grid race coming up where we're going to see a complete difference in strategy for a couple of reasons. Because not only are we going to have the field reverse, and those who finish lower down the order in race 1 are going to have a chance to start top in race 2. We're also going to see a bit of learning from race 1 as well as to what the tyres are capable of in these cars. As we saw in Monza, actually, where a few people opted for the soft compounder tyre, but it very much became apparent that it was not going to make it towards the end. Drivers, of course, do have opportunity to learn the track, at least if they take part in the Touring Car Championship, which I'm very apologetic that we still haven't had a stream of so far this season. It's pretty much we're a quarter of the way through that championship technically now, I believe, and I am yet to stream, and I am very sorry. I very much enjoyed the Touring Car Championship. It's a great chance to see some road-going machinery battling it out on track. This year, of course, we are also running on identical circuits to the Formula Alpha series, so there's some big name circuits there. But my internet service provider completely went down for around about 10 hours. So that's less than ideal. And it's not very conducive to streaming when you don't have any 4 or 5G in your area. And Matt Daly's certainly going to want a bit more tyre grip at this point. Are we starting to see those soft compounder tyres wearing out? He spins the car around quickly. He was reporting the car acting like it was on ice in qualifying. Are we seeing it acting like it's on ice in the race? Now Matt dropping down to P3. Willigliss, who's had a quiet race so far, Willigliss has, might now be looking like he's in play here for something a bit more than just a P3. I say just a P3, of course, a fantastic achievement, but it looks like he could be fighting for a little bit more now. So we see Matt Daly will be thoroughly disappointed with that, because he seemed to be pushing on that lap. He did have a purple Sector 1 on this lap, of course. Not quite going to be purple through Sector 2, just a few seconds off. But had to start to see the tyres really come towards the end of the line. He pushed on them a bit too much, and that was it. The tyres just gave in. Lovely detail on this circuit, by the way, I must add. Fantastic track mod provided, of course, and all organised by Guy Swarbrick, who put together these championships, editor of Alfa Romeo Driver, and does a lot of work behind the scenes for the club, so thank you to him as ever. But it's a fantastic track mod, this. As you can see, the TV screens in the background where the crowds would usually be are actually broadcasting the race that you're seeing right now. As you can see in the top right corner of your screen there, ladies and gentlemen, the camera is actually having a look at what is going on track. That's a lovely little bit of detail. I think it's using the replay buffer to find some of that. That is fantastic. A little bit of detail there. As we can see, the crowd, not quite capacity for Singapore in the background, but certainly some watching on nonetheless, as we're on board with Matt Daly in P3 at the moment. That earlier instance, not the way you wanted this race to go as we approach the halfway stage. And there we have that Sector 2 slightly off the pace, and Sector 3 also off the pace as well, as I imagine he's trying to bring those tyres into a more comfortable window if possible. Colin Knief and Willigliss also with a couple of purple sectors there by the looks of things on the previous lap. So we're getting, I think, into this crucial stage of the race now where we see the fuel load beginning to make a notable difference in terms of its mass. So the car's burnt quite a lot of the fuel, and now the car's getting lighter. But also the tyres have still just got a little bit of life left in them where you can push on them and you're not going to work them too hard because there's still a bit of tread left on them, so they're not going to overheat and lose all grip. And I think we're starting to see some quick lap times coming up now. Our fastest lap of the race so far was Colin Knief's previous lap at 2:02.351, 10 seconds ahead of Willigliss and Matt Daly. He is leading and leading well at the moment, is Colin Knief. At no point, just like with Lando Norris, did it look like it was under threat. The only difference is Colin Knief hasn't nearly put it into a wall in his orange liveried car. So he's looking very cool, calm and collected, is Colin Knief as he heads further into this race. Just over 10 minutes to go now as things stand. Still plenty of battling going on elsewhere in the field though, as we have Jack Cotton and Paul Millman only a few seconds apart now. Well, I think what we're starting to see is that, as I was just saying, that the crossover point in terms of tyre grip, it is coming into play now. Paul Millman at 2:05.6 on the previous lap. Jack Cotton at 2:05.5 on the previous lap. So they are now matching each other in terms of pace. Jack on the soft compounder tyre is going to have a fairly tall order in front of him, I would say. Paul Millman, with a good outing in Monza last time around, will be feeling pretty confident in the car, I presume, as we see him on the medium compounder tyre as well. So he's got a bit more grip left in that car as we head later into the race. Jack Hodson, meanwhile, is going to be nursing this car to try and bring it home, to try to avoid some of those curbs. We learned in Monza, of course, that this car perhaps a little bit sensitive to the old curbs sometimes. So we want to make sure he doesn't ride a curb too hard, otherwise this short wheelbase car will spit you off, as it looks like Matt Daly has had another big incident. He's back underway, but I think with some front wing damage to boot. It was a 25 km/h collision with a barrier there, so that is very worrisome for Matt Daly there, but it's probably a little bit less worrisome for Will Inglis, as he was feeling a little bit under pressure, I suspect, was Will Inglis, because yes, Matt had that earlier incident, but he's still very much in the mix. But now with 2 seconds between them and a bit of damage on Matt Daly's car, things might be looking Will's way. Although it will be interesting to see how these two have fared on the soft compound of tyre as we head past the 15-minute mark in this race with just under 10 to go. We're going to see these tyres starting to give up now, and it's going to become very much a question who has managed the tyres better, who's got a little bit of life left as they fight for a podium. Do not exclude the likes of Jack Otten or Paul Millman from this. Alex Smith on that medium compound tyre would have been hoping, I think, for a little bit more later on into the race. Unfortunately, an earlier instance rather stopped his charge. Out in front then, it is Colin Knief leading this race by 12 seconds, 202.3, his best lap, his last lap at 202.9. So the only driver in the 202s at any point in this race, and still there as well. He is going rather well, it must be said. Meanwhile, Steve Knight, who we saw earlier on, I believe just had to dive into the bits. No, he hasn't. He is still able to continue on, which is the most important thing. He had that early race incident which saw him in a wall. It's been a race of attrition pretty much since then for him, as we've just had another incident as well in the Alpha driver of the Reed car for Alex Smith. So, Alex, I am very sorry for you there. It's going to be very much a focus on the reverse grid race now, I suspect, as it will, of course, put him into a decent position there, and he can try and fight for a winner or a podium in that one. We're actually on board with Alex as he heads through the complex from turn 15, well, what was once the corner complex of turn 15 through to turn 16. Much less of one now, because the old circuit section no longer there. It's just one big straight line from 15 down to 16. I do miss that part of the track, I must admit. It rather feels like Singapore has lost some of its charm, at least. Hopefully it does return. But certainly plenty of charm on this map, though, as I've said. I'm enjoying some of the details going on here. The graphics looking rather lovely as well. You'd be hard-pressed to remember that Assetto Corsa is actually now an 11-year-old game, probably 12 with some of the beta releases. It's certainly not, you know, a blockbuster release in terms of graphics, but it's by no means bad, especially with some of these mods we got running as well. It's a good-looking simulator is Assetto Corsa. It makes me even more excited for the second iteration of the game, the evolution, coming in the coming, I was going to say months, probably years, knowing the current gaming industry. As we have, Steve Knight, I think, has just had another small incident. He has been able to carry on, though, which, as I said before, is the most important thing. Is Matt Daly now finds himself very close indeed to Will Inglis. This has become a little bit unexpectedly, it must be said. And it all seems to be down to just fair racing. I can't see any major slowdown. Actually, no, Sector 2 for Will Inglis was slow. I suspect a little bit of an incident or a near incident for Will has seen him lose a bit of position as we look at the back of the grandstand. Will Inglis is under pressure as around the outside. Matt Daly has a look. He's going to go for the switchback instead because there's no way around the long way. Here we go, back onto the start-finish straight in just a moment. There is the pit entry, quite a difficult pit entry, this one, into the longest pit lane on any Formula 1 calendar, and back on to the throttle now. It is Matt Daly in the slipstream. The wing would usually be opening up at this point, but it's very skinny on these cars anyway. As we head into the first corner, Matt Daly much more aggressive onto the curbs, though. Will Inglis playing it safely, going a little bit wider on the apex, and perhaps try and build up a bit of a defence and also look after the car a little bit more. Let's see what Matt Daly can do, though, as he is very much full charge at this point. Just over 5 minutes to go in this race, and we're going to see the yellow versus the blue and yellow as we run down towards turn 7 now. Matt Daly having a look potentially. We'll just have to wait and see a bit of a kink in the straight here. What would usually once again be a DRS zone. He dives down the inside, does Matt Daly. Going to set himself up for the braking zone, but it's well defended by Will Inglis there. As we carry on into the second sector of this lap now. Quite a long lap in these Formula 4/F1 Academy inspired cars, of course. If you're not familiar, these cars are pretty much what the brilliant racing driving females are racing in the F1 Academy, and they are a fantastic bunch of racers. With the races, have been some fantastic action in that series already, and it is all courtesy of the multi-air powered Tartus FA01 chassis. A brilliant racing car, very good at grassroots as well, and it makes for some fantastic action because it is so approachable, yet it's so enjoyable to race as well. It seems to be a bit of a favourite of the drivers. It's favourite mechanics as well. Quite easy to mend if you do make a bit of a hash of things. But I certainly don't think we're going to be seeing that. We're going to be seeing some great action between these two once again. 0.4 of a second now separating Matt Daly and Will Inglis as we come towards the end of the lap. Just 20 seconds to go now. There we can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen just how much things are slowed down when you're in the midst of battle. But Matt Daly darts out there. It's going to go late on the brakes, down the inside. A move he had to try and perform around the outside last time. He goes to the inside for this lap, but it doesn't quite work out. They make contact as they head through turn 16 and 17. And run down towards the final corner once again. It's Matt Daly having a look around the outside. Will Inglis seems to have the upper hand for now, but has lost some momentum as he starts the start-finish straight. Matt Daly darting around, is going to go for the outside instead, but Will's going to have the defence over the inside line, goes deep into the corner. Could this be it for Will Inglis? Matt Daly sieves his way through, uses turn 2 as a straight line, and as he heads through turn 3, it's Matt Daly in the lead. What would usually be our DRS detection point, but don't fear at all because the battle does continue on. Turn 5, the right-hander, is still going to be plenty of action as Matt Daly loses the back end, pushing the car too hard. The car spins around, goes towards the barrier, collects Will Inglis as well. Remember when I said Jack Hodson and Paul Millman? Certainly not out of it yet. Well, here is Jack Hodson up into P3 now. He'll be very happy with that one. Will Inglis potentially not quite so happy, and Matt Daly, I am sure, absolutely furious with himself for that one. The car just relenting there, nothing it could really do for that one. It looked to be such a quick instant, very difficult to catch an oversteer moment like that in an open wheel car, as Jack Hodson has his own oversteer moment now as he pushes on to try and battle with Will Inglis. Let's not forget at one point Jack Hodson down in P5 in this race now fancies his chances at second on the podium. He's already got himself third if he can keep the nose clean. Let's see what he can do from here now, and fighting Will Inglis, who just a moment ago was fighting Jack Hodson. It seems to have gone wrong for Jack Hodson now as he headed into the corner there. He's facing the opposite direction. Where is he? He is stuck at turn 10. Oh, that is utter disaster for Jack Hodson. My heart goes out to you there. Just going too deep into the corner. The tyres weren't there anymore. The car potentially overheating. The brakes, of course, are very capable in these cars, but if they don't have the tyres underneath them, they're not going to slow you down. And unfortunately for Jack Hodson, that car just did not get slowed down. So Paul Millman, who waited with bated breath, was looking at driving a very patient race there on the medium compound of tyre. Jack, of course, on those softs. Paul now finds himself in P4 once again. It's been a good race for Paul so far. Matt Daly rather saved by that one, it must be said, back up into P3. Not quite as close to Will Inglis as he'd like to be, but certainly not very far away at all. 2 seconds separating these two drivers as we head on to the start-finish straight once again. Would you believe it? 1 minute 30 seconds on the timer for this race already. It has absolutely flown by, courtesy of the battling action we've seen between Will Inglis, Matt Daly, Jack Hodson, Paul Millman. Colin Keefe has been in control of this race. A very Lando Norris-esque driver to be 30 seconds out front ahead of everyone, but dare I say, with a couple of mistakes. I kid, of course. Lando Norris, a very capable driver, actually fairly big fan of one of the very capable British drivers on the grid there, of course. There was a sim race back in 2020 where he did lose out to a fairly big name, it must be said, and it was a sanctioned thing. I'm not going to mention it at all, you know. I've got to be very humble about these things, or this person, sorry, is going to be very humble about these things. Lando Norris P2 Spa, Reeve Taylor in an Alfa Romeo P1. It was a I don't want to talk about it too much, but so. To say that Colin Keefe can nearly keep up with me, effectively, is what we're saying. If he can be quicker than Lando Norris, Colin can nearly keep up with me. That's what we're saying here. He's driven a mighty drive, has Colin Keefe. As we see Will Inglis under pressure from Matt Daly once again. I joke, of course, Colin, when we last did a summer endurance championship or some summer fun races, there's certainly no keeping up required from Colin Keefe to race with me. It was very much a case of bookends, really. Bookends for the field. Colin at the top, Reeve very much not at the top. Portimao in the LP GT3, the Giulia GT3 inspired race car was not my strongest race, it must be said. Anyway, we continue on to a much stronger race as the timer hits 0. It is Will Inglis still battling Matt Daly this late on into the race. We thought these battles were going to be very much over with those earlier incidents, but I'm glad to report they are continuing on. Colin Knief currently heading into sector 2 and what will be on the last laps of this race. As we see, Will Inglis still defending from Matt Daly, where of course he lost the position a very short while ago. He has now found himself in the lead of the race once again. But the question is, lead of this battle once again. But the question is, will he still be in the battle? I'll try that again. Give myself a reboot. Will he still be in the lead of this battle within the next lap or two? The gap certainly has extended now. Will Inglis building up 0.8 of a second to Matt Daly, make that 0.7. So it's still a very fine margin between these two drivers. Matt Daly at 202.9, his best. Will Inglis at 203.6, both on the soft compounder tyre. It's hard to say really which tyre is going to be looking stronger between the two cars here, because they are both carrying a little bit of damage at this point. In terms of our tyre differences, we'll have a look at those very shortly. It looks to be Colin, obviously, in the mid-202s, whereas Paul Millman in 205s. It seems to be fairly even between the two compounds of tyre, as we are going to go on board with Colin Knief heading through turn 16 and turn 17, that medium compound tyre runner. I suspect one of the many good decisions he's made before this race start. There is another Lando Norris comparison there in the orange car. A slight tap of the wall, but that doesn't seem to be phasing him too much at all, really, as he rounds turn 19 to start the final lap of this race. And what a race it has been for Colin, leading this championship by 24 points already. He's looking to expand that lead and expand it well. It's certainly looking to be a good championship for Colin Knief at this point. It'll be 3 race victories under his belt, 3 out of 3. A fantastic drive for Colin. Let's go on board though with a few of his competitors a little bit further down the road. It's still Will Inglis ahead of Matt Daly, 1 second separating these two as they come ready to start the next lap of this race, or rather the final lap of this race for these two drivers. They start that now then. Half a second separating the two on that previous lap. It's still very close, but the momentum seems to be swinging slightly more towards Will Inglis at this point. Let's see if there's going to be any brave moves there. The car, Matt Daly's car there, certainly looked very eager to rotate as he headed through turn 2 there. So let's see if he is able to keep control of things. Paul Millman running well in P4, Jack Hodson P5, Alex Smith in P6, and then we have Steve Knight running in at P7. Colin Knief, though, is the man on top. He's been on top from start to finish. He's had a great drive so far, and I suspect that's only going to continue into race 2 coming up in just a few moments. That reverse grid race, of course, he's going to have to work a little bit harder for it in order to side his way through the field at the very start of that race. We'll have a few of our lapped cars crossing the line now as they finish this race. What a race it has been for the likes of Colin Knief. There we see Steve Knight just in front, but that's not a man he is racing. Colin Knief is very much just cruising to bring this car home now. Diving into turn 16 in just a moment. Be one of the last times he needs to jump on the brakes in this race before he gets ready for the reverse grid race. And it has been a fantastic drive for Colin as he gets back onto the start-finish straight in just a moment. As I say, led from lap 1. At no point did he seem to crack under pressure, bringing it home on the medium compounder tyres. Colin is showing us how it's done. A 3rd race of victory of the season for Colin Knief. My hat goes off to you, Colin, as he comes home in 1st place. Gets ready for the reverse grid race in just a moment. Up next then, we are going to have Will Inglis rounding the final couple of corners, but Will Inglis has made a slight bit of contact with the wall. Has that phased him too much? I don't suspect so. I think Matt Daly is still just behind, having a look at the inside ever so slightly, though. Surely too far back to make anything stick this late on in the race, though, as we head through to the final corner once again. As you see these cars squatting down, running lots of camber, of course, to navigate those corners onto the start-finish straight. It certainly wasn't an easy battle, but it was Will Inglis who comes home P2. Matt Daly rounding out the podium in P3. Then we have a little wait for Paul Millman. Paul Millman coming home P4 then. Top 5 finish for Paul. He'll be very happy with that one. Commiserations to Jack Hodson, who at one point was fighting for 2nd place in this race. Started in P5, worked his way past Paul, found himself fighting for P2 later on. And unfortunately, it all went just a little bit wrong. And now we have Jack Hodson coming home in P5. That's our top 5. Then we have Alex Smith and Steve Knight rounding out the running for this race. So certainly a busy race in Singapore. What you expected, Singapore. It's always going to be an interesting one. But don't worry, the action is not over just yet as we wait for these few drivers to come across the line. We're going to have some more fun coming up in just a moment as we get ready for the reverse grid race in just a second. Welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. It is good to be back, ready for race 2, this reverse grid race then. Just over 30 seconds now until lights out, and here's our order. It is Steve Knight, Alex Smith on the front row, then we have Jack Hodson, Paul Milman, row 2, Matt Daly winning list on the third, and then race victor Colin Keefe all the way back at the back of the order in P7. This is going to be an exciting one, I suspect, given how confident we saw Colin Keefe was running into turn 1 last time around. Let's see how he does it from the back this time around. I should mention briefly, my car was out on the grid, so I'm glad that has rectified itself. Otherwise, I'd have to very quickly get my sim rig out and take part in some racing in a very different car. Either way, though, the revs begin to rise as we have 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away for another race here at Singapore. Good start for Alex Smith there. He's on that medium compounder tyre still, but it seems to have the grip to get him away. Not quite as well, though, as Jack Hodson, who leads this race into the first corner, has the inside line, then gets pushed off a little bit in a very familiar move to Singapore fans, and now still sees himself in the lead of this race. Briefly, Alex got a nose ahead, but it is Jack Hodson who maintains his position, maintains his line, finds himself up into P1, as we have Alex Smith under pressure from Paul Millman. Paul with a good race in race 1, he's hoping to replicate that in race 2. Then we have Matt Daly running in P4 with Colin Kniefer just behind, so Colin having a good start. Will Inglis not having the best start in the world, but is still certainly in the mix here as we head through to the rest of this race. Jack Hodson then leading this race. Looks like Steve Knight has unfortunately had some technical difficulties that sees him not unfortunately starting this race with everyone else. Either way, let's see if he can get some decent laps in. Alex Smith then at the moment in P2 with the medium compounder tyre. Under pressure though, must be said. Maybe the warm-up phase not quite going his way. Either way, he's lost a position to Paul Millman as he now sits in P3. And there we see Matt Denny darting out to try and get a position. He's going to go late on the brakes, I suspect. There he goes, yeah. Bit of collision, bit of contact between the couple of cars potentially, or was that just an off of Alex Smith's own volition there? Not too sure. Either way, he tumbles down the order, does Alex Smith. A great shame to see him pretty much out the mix this early on. This is very good though for both Jack Hodson and Paul Millman. These two drivers, of course, fighting for P4 and P5 in race 1, now find themselves at the top end of the field, fighting for P2, and we've got to say Paul Millman is doing a world of favours for Jack Hodson at the moment. He is very much a cork in the bottle by the looks of things against the likes of Matt Daly, Colin Kniefer and Will Inglis. Jack Hodson is 2 seconds his lead out in front, and here is why, because we have Paul Millman very much on the defence, but it's going to be the inside line is open for Paul Millman. Sorry, it is open for Matt Daly, and Matt Daly says thank you very much. It is Matt Daly up into P2. Then we have Paul Millman, our man now in P3, rounding out that podium for the time being, but Colin Kniefer, our race 1 victor of course, who was very much class of field in qualifying and in race 1, fancies his chances at another overtake, I suspect, as he has a tentative look, we shall say, into the first corner, but isn't able to get past just yet. Bit of contact potentially there, as Paul Millman was on the defence, but I don't think he was even on defence that much. I think he was just trying to position the car up for turn 3. Either way, no damage. Those two can carry on at full pelt, which is what we like to see. I should note, in terms of tyre compounder, everyone, just as we saw in Monza, seems to be a little bit more aligned now, as we have a few more medium compound tyre runners. But we do still have Matt Daly on the soft compounder tyre, so perhaps he's thinking if he can maybe nurse the car a little bit better this time around, he might get a bit more life out of the soft. And I'd certainly, yeah, I'd agree with him on that one. Not that I am a well-informed party by any means. I'm hardly who you go to for your strategy or racing advice, but Matt Daly, I think, is if anyone is capable of eking out a bit of extra life out of the tyres, the likes of Colin or Matt certainly are. We saw Jack Hodson in race 1 was looking like he nearly made that soft compounder tyre work for the entire race duration. He was still competitive on the top end of the field, made some positions. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. So we'll see if Matt is able to make that alternate strategy work this time round. He's certainly making it work at the moment, because Jack Hodson, who had that 2-second lead just a lap ago, now finds himself with a 1.5-second lead as we head a few minutes further into the race. The white and yellow liveried car there, following the yellow and white liveried car. You can make your mind up which one is which. They're two contrasting liveries, I think that's what we'll go with. There's Matt Daly at the moment who's setting those purple sectors. We're not talking about yellow sectors, we're talking about purple. And it is a 39.5 through sector 1, a 51 through sector 2. Matt Daly's absolutely flying along now. Tyres, those medium compounder tyres, will be very much in a nice temperature window now. You'll be surprised how quickly a set of tyres warms up when you've got 600 kilos car belting it around at full chat. As we saw Colin and Paul then actually approaching a bit of a pinch point as we headed into turn 16, where the barrier faces back towards the circuit, and Colin was pretty much off the circuit, about as off the circuit as you could really be here at Singapore. I had a bit of an incident with both Paul Millman and the wall, so I'm glad to see he was able to carry on with pretty much no ill effects. As we see Matt Daly now ahead of Colin Kniefer. Colin Kniefer's got ahead of Paul Millman, but Paul Millman is still fighting it rather fiercely, it must be said. He was looking a little bit leery heading into the braking zone there, but I know the reason why, and you can see it too, ladies and gentlemen. That is because there is Will Inglis hunting him down. This is leading up to be a fantastic race, ladies and gentlemen, as we have Will Inglis now with the left-handed corner coming up in just a moment. Down the inside, late on the brakes, didn't quite work this time round, but he does have another opportunity. Does Will Inglis. He's going to back out of it though. He's going to try and wait. He's going to try and bide his time and pick an easier opportunity, I suspect, which is probably wise this early on in the race. There's no need to be belting it out into the corners and absolutely throwing caution to the wind and risking a front wing, but she's still got at least 15 more minutes, certainly 10, of a perfectly raceable, drivable car in this race. So you don't have to think about time management quite so much at this point. Why not? Or sorry, rather at that point, why not save the car now and make sure you're certainly going to be there to actually enjoy the podium later on. Paul still very much on the defence at the moment. Looking like it's a good battle between these two as we go on board with Colin Cleef for another good battle on the front end of the field, and in fact it's about to be a three-way battle for the lead of this race. Up first though, for Jack Hodson, the position is completely under threat. It is the fight between Colin and Matt Daly. Here we see them side by side, having a look into the braking zone. Colin Cleef, the corner kind of tapers away though if you're taking the inside line, which promotes some fantastic racing action, especially around the outside as you head into turn 16, especially these narrow cars as well. And there we see Matt Daly with the inside line for turn 18 and 19, securing the position for just that little bit longer. This is going to be a fantastic bit of action now between Colin Cleef and Matt Daly, a rivalry which we are very familiar with throughout time. Of course, it is quite an infamous battling duo, these two. They certainly know how to fight each other, have given us many great battles in the past, and I'm sure they're going to give us some more fantastic action, including what we've got right here and right now. Colin Cleef, Sector 1 and Sector 2, purple that time round. Jack Hodson, Sector 3, purple for him out in front, so he's still fighting it with all that he's got. In the background, we also have Paul Milman and Will English. You'll see them every now and again coming into shot. This is a very close race to reverse grid race, it must be said. The top end of the field really only covering around about 10 seconds there or thereabouts. It is fascinating stuff there, and Will English has a big incident at the back end of the field. I think there was a huge collision between the two drivers. They took themselves out in the braking zone potentially. That is disaster for the cars fighting for P4 and P5. They are able to carry on, but they're certainly dropping down. The commentator's curse there very much doing its work to extend that field gap just that little bit more. As we go on board with Matt Daly, he is 1 second down on Jack Hodson, but he's very much focused on the orange car behind him. 0.3 of a second between him and Colin Cleef, as this is going to be a great battle now. It was potentially looking to be a five-way battle. Not quite going to be the case anymore, but still, three cars fighting it out is still very much enjoyable. Nonetheless, side by side as they go into the right-handed braking zone coming up just now. And it is Matt Daly still in the lead of this battle. This is, of all, usually when you see street circuit, you panic because you just think it's going to be full of 90-degree right-handers, a little bit of straight line speed followed by a boring braking zone, quite tight, twisty circuit you can't really overtake. Singapore is a little bit different, I would say. It is a street circuit executed very well indeed. As I mentioned before, you've got some lovely switchbacks on offer from the circuits. The way that the corners are set up do promote some interesting overtaking opportunities that you wouldn't usually expect. Combine that with the fact that we've got quite a narrow, small, nippy little car here, it makes some great racing action because this is quite a wide circuit to one of these cars. So as we see Matt Daly heading into turn 1, he's using some of those corners and apexes to defend from Colin Cleef. Colin, who is very skilled clearly and is leading this championship by a comfortable margin, has not got an answer for Matt Daly at this point. Now that could be due to multiple things. It could just be Matt Daly's raw talent, that certainly is one of the factors. Could also be due to the fact that Matt Daly is at the moment on that soft compound of tyre, of course. Only 9 minutes into this race, that soft compound of tyre won't be completely dead yet. It's going to be another few minutes before we start to see a crossover point where the medium might be looking like the safer alternative. He certainly has learned from race 1, I suspect, though, where it looked a little bit leery for Matt. Maybe the tyres weren't in a comfortable window, the car wasn't warmed up quite so gently. And then he seems to be really fighting the car for pretty much the rest of the race. It looks quite good for Matt Daly at this point. He seems to be nicely in control of the car. He seems to be bringing the fight to Colin Cleef. As I say, he's on that soft compound of tyre, so you'd expect a bit more grip at this point, but I think, even with a bit of degradation later on, we're going to have some fantastic action. It was around this point in race 1 where we saw Colin Cleef setting that impressive 2-minute 2 lap time, but the battling has been so good here in race 2. No one's had a chance to do that, really. Colin Cleef is our fastest man out on track at this point. Perhaps no surprise there. His best lap being a 2:03.5. Everyone at the moment, everyone at the front end of the field in the 2-minute 4s, the low 2-minute 4s. at this moment in time. Further down the field, though, seems to be a very different story. I suspect there's been a couple of incidents, all pretty much simultaneous. There is Willingless with no front wing left. You can't quite see it at the moment, but if it's at a wonky angle like that, that is usually the game's indication that there's no front wing at all, as Matt Daly has his own little incident with a wall. He is able to carry on, though, so that's certainly good for our battle. Willingless with a bit of an incident. Then we have Paul Millman and Alex Smith on that previous lap, losing about 5 seconds as well, so I suspect an incident earlier, further down the field has caused that. And perhaps responding to my quotes of a fantastic lap from Colin Keneath there, faster out on track, we have Jack Otten out in a front, who's certainly looking more comfortable now. We saw him under pressure in race 1. He did unfortunately crack under pressure, but that does not seem to be the case here in race 2. He is controlling this race, he's using the battling going on behind him very much to his advantage, and is still leading this race, maintaining that margin. As we see Colin Keneath with a great bit of speed underneath me, heading through turn 6 and turn 7. Is going to go late on the brakes, but well defended by Matt Daly there. Bit of a weave on exit as he goes very early onto the throttle. All of that turbocharged low end, probably more mid-range torque of the 1.4 multi-air powered car, forcing the back end of the car to step out ever so slightly. There was a slight bit of contact between them, but that is certainly not going to faze them as we head now down towards Sector 2, the end of Sector 2 rather. And the battle continues on. All this battling, as I say, is helping out Jack Hodson. That 1.2 second margin between Jack and Matt Daly, certainly not insurmountable, but it wouldn't be insurmountable if there was no battling going on. Unfortunately for Matt, and perhaps fortunately for Jack, there's plenty of action between Colin and Matt Daly at this phase in the race. Do we think it's a bit of time for some track discussion in terms of strategy and track conditions? It's not something we delve into all that often, but things are a little bit different for this race because Gareth Robertson doing some work in the background as they tried an experimental weather feature for this round. So the weather is actually echoing, I believe, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was the case at one point, what is going on in Singapore at this moment in time. So we did have a bit of rainfall apparently early in practice/qualifying. That has dried up. That has left some cooler track temperatures. It's about 17 degrees out on track. Usually the circuits we visit, we have a pretty uniform high 20s or 30s. So the tyres are quite easily and quite quickly warmed up by that surface temperature. It's a nice kind of standard average surface temperature. It looks after the tyres well, but also gives you a decent amount of grip. We've gone a bit colder this time around, which is going to take longer in that warm-up phase, but should potentially look after the softer compounded tyres later on into the race. And perhaps this is what Matt Daly is banking on here, as he's hoping to make that soft last for the entire duration of this race. That's going to be a tall order, though, given the battle he is embroiled in at the moment. Jack Hodson still leading, but it must be said, even with that lead out in front for the medium compound tyre running Jack Hodson, these two are closing the gap despite the battle. This is mighty impressive from our two championship contenders here, fighting for P2 and P3. Colin's just gone purple in Sector 1. I imagine it's about to look very strong in Sector 2 as well, although his delta's slightly off from his absolute best so far. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screens there, this is the delta for Matt Daly we're looking at the moment. These two are managing to close up the gap to Jack Hodson. So we're going to enter an interesting phase of this race for the two gentlemen we're on board with at the moment, because how they negotiate getting past, or at least racing alongside Jack Hodson, is very much going to dictate how this battle ends now, I suspect. They've got the pace advantage to close up the gap, but do they now decide to put their differences aside and focus on getting a race leading position between one of them, or do they just go for a freeway battle for the lead? The sensible racing driver ahead, that might be a bit of a contrast, but if you're a sensible racing driver, you might think, with your battling buddy, if you will, come on, let's work together now. One of us will take the race lead, and then we can fight it between ourselves. Let's get past the slower car and then sort our differences. Then, as Matt Daly has a bit of an instant, glosses over the curve ever so slightly, that kicks the back end of the car out. He does very well to catch it. That has cost him the momentum, though. It's going to be Colin Keneath down the inside into turn 1. That might be a bit of an opportunity to claw it back between turn 2, but he should be able to defend, should Colin, into turn 3. And now has the door been opened up ever so slightly for Matt to return it back, though not quite so sure. We're going to have a bit of a run down to turn turn 5 before that. It seems to be that Colin Knief are now in control of this battle. This could be a seismic shift in the race for both Colin, Matt, and let's not forget Jack Hodson as well, as Matt is going to try and fight it back as we have the kink in the straight down into turn 6. It worked well. That extra bit of slipstream for Matt Daly. He claws it back. A great response to the battle from Matt Daly there. I thought for a second the exit from turn 5 was looking a little bit squirmish on the back end for Matt Daly's car. The rear grip wasn't there, but the rear grip certainly isn't there for Colin Knief as well. Disaster to the car in black and orange. He has been flawless so far this season. However, as we approach the twilight hours at night here in Singapore, it is not looking well for Colin Knief at this point. He has just lost a few seconds there. He's still ahead of Willing Bliss, so he's in a comfortable position nonetheless. He's still running in the podium, but he was very much in the mix for a race of victory there. It's still, let's not count him out yet. Anything can happen in 10 minutes, but it is Colin now down in P3, and Matt Daly has been released to fight Jack Hodson. Now, I'll look for Jack Hodson at this point. Our race leader has led for the majority of this race at this point. Now, part of his brain is going to be quite relieved, I suspect, to not have both Colin and Matt hunting him down at this point. But he's also going to be very much aware of the fact that Matt Daly's effectively just been released. And this is when, once again, a bit of tyre strategy I think is going to come into play here. Jack Hodson has been going pretty much flat out, I think, but does have the medium compounder tyre. Matt Daly has also been going flat out, but is on the much less hard-wearing soft compounder tyre. And as we've already seen from Matt's car, it's starting to give way, I suspect. The back end is starting to lurch around a little bit and not quite respond in the way that Matt would like it to. So it's going to be an interesting race here. I suspect Matt Daly is going to close up. We will find out, of course, ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments' time if Matt is able to do that. But can he maintain that lead and can he bring that fight to Jack Hodson, who has been in control of this race for such a long time in this race? Big thank you to organiser Guy Swarbrick, who is watching along for this one. I believe he is away with other commitments, so he isn't able to take part this evening, but is watching along. So hello to you there, who has just provided me some very useful background information regarding how the setup is working for this round. So for the touring car round last week and for the single-seater round as well, we are using live weather data, of course, but it being currently early hours of the morning in Singapore, unlike the F1 race, it's quite cold, or comparatively quite cold. It's never really that cold in Singapore, but comparatively it's quite cold. So hence why we've got these low tarmac temperatures. So thank you for that little bit of extra information, Guy. Much appreciated, as we are on board at the moment with Jack Hodson. Half a second separates him and Matt Daly in P2. I just want to mention, by the way, as we just head into the final few minutes of this race, Colin Knief really not that far behind, despite his earlier incidents. It was a 2-minute 10 on the previous lap, as you can see there. But if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll also see the predicted part of the timing system, the Delta system, where you can see a 2:03.0 predicted for Colin Knief at the moment. And why is that? That is because he has absolutely flung it through Sector 1, a 38.6. Those medium compounder tyres, still a bit of life left in them, have very much spurred Colin Knief on. We've had a change for position as we head further up the field there. Apologies, we missed that one, but as we headed into turn 16, late on the race goes Matt Daly and gets ahead of Jack Hodson. A fantastic move there that had been brewing for a little while potentially, but I think Jack Hodson is going to fight it back now as we head on to the start-finish straight. Once again, having a look up turn 1. There goes Jack Hodson, decides better of it though, perhaps a very sensible move there, rides over the curb. Matt Daly gets a little bit of a kick out the backside of the car, but then Jack Hodson gets even more of one and has to go a little bit of opposite lock there to correct the car. He's able to do so, and he's able to continue on in this battle. Colin, setting 2 purple sectors in that previous lap, has been rather released, it seems, by not being involved in that battle with Matt Daly. Has got 2 purple sectors to make a 2-minute 2.0, his fastest racing lap of the evening so far. He is absolutely flying along his Colin, and I think with 5 minutes to go, despite everything that's gone on, he's going to be in the mix in this race once again. 9 laps down, around another 3 or 4 to go based on when we cross the line here, as we see Jack Hodson really wringing everything out of that car that he can. Seems to be pushing on a little bit on the front end, potentially through some of these tighter corners, so we'll see a bit of understeer perhaps for Jack Hodson, a bit of oversteer for Matt Daly, and things are looking just right in the middle for Colin Knief there. He's not in the middle of this battle though, he's currently in P3 at the back end of the fight, but I suspect he's, despite all the odds really being against him due to that earlier incident, is going to be in the mix for this battle once again, which I say all the odds, perhaps all the odds if you look on a more microscopic level in terms of just this race, but if you look at the championship so far, you'd have to say things are looking rather well for Colin, so that's why he's been able to catch up. Matt Daly still leading this race at the moment, but we are going to have a look at that championship as it stands at the moment. As you see, 1 second now, that margin between Matt Daly and Jack Hodson, and you have to say Jack Hodson now probably more focused on what is going on just behind him there, and it's very close behind his rearview mirrors. In fact, it's not even really behind anymore, it's now pretty much side by side. Colin is going to have to back out of it as he enters turn 1, but through the mid-phase of turn 1, what a move there from Colin Knief. That came out of nowhere, uses turn 2, the track falling away from him to get the position as he runs through turn 3. That is a fantastic overtaking move from Colin Knief there. He set that up in turn 1, executed it by turn 3, now finds himself in second position to ready to try and hunt down Matt Daly for that race victory once again. Jack Hodson, who has controlled this race for so long in race 2, has eventually relented the victory scoring position, but you have to say it's been a great drive, much improved over race 1. Race 1 he was looking punchy, but unfortunately things didn't work out for him, and Colin Knief once again, the back end of the car steps out. It seems to be the rear axle on these short wheelbase cars, perhaps with cooler track temperatures and slightly worn tyres, are really proving to be a bit of a bugbear for some of these drivers at this point in the race weekend. Colin Knief drops back down to turn 3 once again. The commentator's curse is clearly here, so I do apologise for that one. Jack Hodson now, I think, perhaps breathing a bit of a sigh of relief, now finds himself in P2 once again. Matt Daly probably also breathing a sigh of relief, leading this race on the soft compounded tyre. 2.5 seconds separate P1 and P2 at this point. What has been one of the largest margins we've had all race. It has been a fantastic battle for the lead out at the front end of things here. Should point out as well, we've still got plenty of good driving going on elsewhere in the field. Had an earlier instance, of course, for Willingless and Paul Milburn, which mean that their bodywork on the cars aren't looking quite as good as they once were. And then we have Stephen Wright running it in P6 as well. That's our order for this race, but it's Matt Daly who is controlling things for the time being. But in terms of this championship, it's very much Colin Knief at this point. Of course, this is about to change as we come across the line at the end of this race in a few minutes' time. But as things stand, it's Colin Knief with 75 points to his name, then Paul Millman in P2 with 37, Alex Smith P3 32, and then it gets very close indeed as we have Matt Daly P4 31, matched by Jack Hodson P5 31. So this is an important battle, not just this race victory, but also for the championship as well. Then we have Paul Brady P6. Get well soon, Paul. By the way, I believe you are currently otherwise indisposed of, but hopefully we'll have you back and racing soon enough. And then we have Alan Matthews running in P7 as well, 26 points matching there. Then we have Willie Bliss P8 22 and Steve Knight P9 on 6. So a very close championship and a very close race here in race 2 as well. As Matt Daly still controlling things in terms of the lap time at the moment. Things have started to tumble away, even for those on the medium compounds. And now Matt Daly on the softs at 205.1. Jack Hodson actually at 205.8. So I think there's been some fantastic time management here from Matt Daly. We've seen things not looking quite as comfortable as they were early on, but he's certainly still got the measure of things for the moment. And Jack Hodson, yes, he's lost the position, but I'm sure he's still very happy with how things are sitting at the moment, as it looks to be getting closer as we head towards the very end of this race. Now we are getting ready to potentially start the penultimate lap of this race. We're heading down towards turn 14, what would usually be a DRS zone on this circuit. Of course, the tight right-hander coming up, which ever so slightly turns back on itself. There's some interesting angles, as I alluded to earlier, of a lot of the corners at this circuit here. So it does make for some brilliant action. It's nice to come back here in such a small car. It's been a pleasant surprise. I think even on a slightly larger street circuit, you know, there's obviously Monaco and Baku are smaller than than Singapore in general. It's quite a large Formula 1 car these days, so they make any circuit look quite small. It's quite refreshing to come back for a reasonably sized car as we do now start the penultimate lap of this race. Potentially the final, as we seem to cross the line there as the timer hit 0. But it is still Matt Daly leading this race for the time being. Only half a second in it, though. It's looking very fine margins indeed between the yellow liveried car and the primarily grey liveried car as well. Matt Daly, obviously, multiple championship winner in the past. And then we have Jack Hudson, who is not going to say a relative newcomer. He's got a few championships worth of experience under his belt now. But has certainly been one of those up-and-comers rising through the ranks and getting stronger and stronger with each passing race, each passing championship. And a very strong move there that might not have been on, unfortunately, for our two frontrunners. And then all of a sudden, we have Colin Knief, who was very much out of things, really, early on, with a very damaged front wing. Now finds himself with 0 seconds on the clock, leading this race. This is exactly what the championship contender, or championship leader at the moment, perhaps didn't want to happen, but needed to happen in order to secure that championship lead just that little bit more. That is very unfortunate for our two drivers who were at one point leading this race, who very much deserve to lead this race owing to the attrition rates of other cars in the field, and now find themselves running in P2 and P3. One very small incident there sees these two tumbling a little bit down the order. It's still for a podium, but just not where they would have wanted to have been. As we go back on board with Colin Knief, getting a bit of deja vu now. Didn't think this would happen a few laps ago, but now we see Colin Knief leading this race, a 13-second margin, as he just needs to bring it home once again. The car in slightly worse condition than it was in race 1, but it seems to be a slightly more traditional Colin Knief race by the end of things. Here, I want to also point out, Willingless, having those unfortunate incidents earlier on, now finds himself looking rather strong and potentially poised to get a podium. So let's see if anything happens in the dying few seconds of this race. But we're going to head around the turn 18 once again with Colin Knief in the lead of things this time around. A bit of an unexpected victor, but it is Colin who takes the checkered flag. Congratulations, Colin. A double race victory. That is now 4 out of 4 for Colin Knief, a formidable opponent. And then we're going to have Matt Daly, who does eventually lead this battle between himself and Jack Hudson. It just briefly was for the lead of this race. It's Matt Daly P3, Matt Daly P2, Jack Hudson P3, Willingless P4 then. He was getting very close to a podium indeed. Very action-packed at that race too. Singapore never disappoints. Certainly doesn't in the AROC racing leagues. It might have been Formula 1 last weekend, but it certainly hasn't this time around. Paul Milman comes home P5. We're going to have Alex Smith classified P7, Steve Knight P6 as well. You always know it's a good race when Reeve finishes everything with a bit of a sore throat, but it has been absolutely wall-to-wall action, all for the lead of the race as well. As I say, Singapore never disappoints. There's been some great driving on display. An unfortunate late race incident there changes things, but once again, Colin Knief proving that he's always in the mix somehow. He is always ready to fight and bring home those trophies and bring home those championships as well. So that does bring an end to round 2 of the Formula Alpha Championship for 2024 here at Singapore. We'll join you in a fortnight's time for some more single-seater action, and hopefully this time, as much as I've tried to so far this season, for the first streamed round of touring car action next week as well. So I hope you've very much enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating this evening, and we'll see you very shortly. Thank you for watching, and good night.